All right, I'm starting a new commission for our client today, and it is an executive desk. And for this executive desk, we're going to make the top out of a slab walnut. The desk is 32 inches wide, and in my area I could not find a slab wide enough for this desk. So we're going to take these two guys and seam them together, and hopefully it will look like one slab when we're done. Now the desk on the guest side has a live edge, but on the business side it is squared off. All right, so the first thing I need to do is decide which one of the live edges I like best, and that will be the guest side of the thing. So this one's pretty straight, that one's pretty straight and boring. This guy's got a little bit of a wave back and forth, but this guy right here, I like how it's wider on this side and then it kind of swoops and curves back out on that side. So I think this side is going to be the side that I keep the live edge. All right, so this side has a crack in it, which would be a good opportunity to put some bow ties, so I'm not too worried about that. I can do a little inlay on there, and it's far enough on the side and front corner that it won't interfere with the writing surface on the desk. But I do want to make sure that I have enough thickness. So this is pretty flat, but this gets down pretty thin, so I might cut it back a little ways here and then flatten this little curve out. So I think I'm going to measure from here to get my length. All right, so the desk length is going to be 66 inches. And so that's going to catch us right about here. I'm going to give myself extra inch just to trim it up later. So I'll cut her off right here. All right, so I'll cut that guy off there. All right, so both of these slabs came from the same tree, so the grain structure is very much the same, so we should be able to seam them together, but I don't want this light streak of sapwood going down the middle of the desk. So I'm going to cut back on this side while I'm still in this tight grain, and then it has the same tight grain on this side, so then I'm going to cut it off on this side, and then that will be my seam, and with that tight grain, it should disappear. All right, so I'm going to take this saw curve for this piece that I cut off, put it underneath here. I'm just going to line it up here. All right, so I don't want this sapwood to end up in my desk, so I'm just going to line this up here. And I'm sighting down to see what direction the grain is. Since this is a nice tight grain on this side and this is a nice tight grain on this side, I want to make sure my grain isn't going diagonal if one of these pieces is crooked. I want to make sure the grain looks like it's one piece of wood. So I'm just sighting down here and just kind of eyeballing what it looks like here. I think that looks pretty good. All right, so I'm going to put a couple of pencil marks and line my track up to the pencil marks. So basically this desk is going to be 32 inches wide. So I just measured from the live edge over here and marked off 32 inches, and that's where I'm going to cut it. And 32 will be just kind of a average of that curved live edge deal. All right, let's clean this off so we can go to the next step. My buddy was over here helping me out the other day, and he's like, "Do you have a bench brush?" I was like, "Yeah, of course I do." All right, so if you look at this right here, this isn't exactly what I'd call flat, so we need to get that taken care of. So I need to get my slab flattening jig down. I should have just thrown it away. Built a new one. All right, so I have the slab facing with its flattest side down, but there's a little gap here, and the pressure of the router, I don't want it to flex that because it'll flex it at least that much out of square or out of flatness. So I'm just going to put a little shim in there to take up that space. If there's anything on the other side, I'll do the same thing. All right, and then I have the whole slab sandwiched between my two rails, so it's not going to go anywhere. And my workbench is a torsion box, so it gives me a nice flat surface to register off of. So I'm just going to clamp this guy down to the torsion box. All right, so that corner is tight to the table. That corner is shimmed to take up that gap. And then if we go down here to the other side, and we look right here, that gap right there needs a little shim. That'll keep it from deflecting. And that's pretty close to tight. I might put a little bit of a shim in there just to make sure. And we are ready to flatten this slab. All right, so how this works is we've shimmed the slab so it won't move around, so it'll stay in this position throughout the entire operation. These front and back rails are cut to the same exact height, and the workbench is a torsion box, so it's nice and flat. So when we move our sled along, it will create a perfectly flat surface relative to the top of this guy and the top of the workbench. And this sled has a hole in it for this ginormous router bit to drop through. So basically I just work this back and forth in this sled and just keep inching it down as I go. And by the time I get all the way to the end, it'll be nice and flat. Now I'll probably have to take several passes because I don't want to take super heavy passes with this big of a bit. But after multiple passes, I should have it nice and flat. And then I'll flip this over. And so then this nice flat surface will register against the flat torsion box. I'll do it again down to my final thickness. So that's the general idea of how it works. All right, one thing I should mention, to prevent tear out, I cut a little rabbet along the edge. So that way, as I pass the router through here, this material is already cut and backed up and it doesn't get tear out. And I did that as a climb cut. So it's a little awkward, but I set the sled up so I could just drag it down here, go in this direction. And then since that's kind of tough to do across the entire slab, then after I got this initial cut, then I'll go back and forth, and then I won't have to worry about tear out right there. All right, we'll flip it over here and do the other side. All right, so now that I'm down to final depth, I still have another half of this desk to do on that other slab, and I want them to be the same thickness. So I'm going to set my depth stop here, and then I'll route the other slab down to that stop, so that way the finished passes will be the exact same height. All right, so the router sled leaves these lines here. So I got a little bit of work to clean that up. I have a solution for that. All right, we got it nice and smooth and flat, so now we just need to work on this seam and joint it together so it fits nice and tight. All right, so now that we got these boards jointed and fitting tight together, I am going to put a floating tenon down the center of these guys. I'm going to space them out about every foot, and that's just to help control movement when I glue them together. I don't want them to slip past each other and creating a ridge. So these will help lock it in when I glue it together, keep them from moving. All right, so we have this live edge here, and I don't want to damage this edge because this is the decorative edge, the whole reason why the client wants this type of top. So I don't want to damage it by putting hard clamping pressure down there, denting it or scratching it or whatever. So I'm only going to use this one clamp just to kind of help pull them together gently as I wrangle these two pieces together once I get the glue spread. And then to clamp the seam, I'm going to use these glue blocks, use CA glue to glue them down to the surface and then pull clamping pressure towards each other with these glue blocks. And with any luck, we'll end up with a nice tight seam and a good strong clamping surface while it dries. Right, to make sure I have even clamping pressure on the top and the bottom, so if I clamp too hard on the top, it could cup up like that. So to make sure I have good even clamping pressure, I'm going to clamp these guys down at the bottom as well. I'm not going to put as many down here, so I'm just going to put enough on here to make sure I'm distributing the pressure. All right, so I'm just gonna apply some gentle pressure. Not enough to dent it, just to try to get the thing started to pull it together. All right, so I took the clamps off now that it's dry, and it's just time to pop these guys off. All right, and then my final sanding before I finish will get rid of all this glue marks. All right, the slab top for our desk is almost done. There is one thing left I want to do, and that is inlay these bow ties along this little crack here, a little decorative inlay. And then we'll sand it up, squirt some finish on it, and move on to the rest of the desk. Now, if you want to see an in-depth video on how I inlay these with nothing but a mallet and chisel, no router at all, I will put a link somewhere to that video.